Welcome to Human Marketing, a weekly podcast for B2B marketers unpacking how brands can stay authentic, demonstrate authority, and build trust as AI floods our feeds with content. I'm Chris Nelson, founder of Human Video. We remotely produce podcasts and other video content with real humans and just the right amount of soul. Welcome to the Human Marketing Podcast, Ashley.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know we've had this on the books for a little while, so super excited to finally get to chat.
No, absolutely. I've been really looking forward to it. I thought it would be a great place to start, just to kind of introduce, I guess, to the audience how I first heard about you. I guess I started my company, Human Video, back at the start of the year, and it's all I was just kind of explaining to you before the call started. It's really all about creating video content remotely with real humans, particularly. And the whole point of starting the company was I was a commercial filmmaker for 15 years, charging all around the world in planes. And I kind of saw the rise of, I guess, AI and all the things that came with that. And my entire premise for the company is that in a world of kind of AI generated content, that potentially the thing that'll still stand out is the real humans kind of in the feed. And as part of that, a few months into that, I'm on my own still, working with a few contractors, but it's kind of a lonely business thinking about this, this kind of new world and creating a kind of new thing. And one of my favorite podcasts is the Attributed Podcast by the great folks at Dream Data. And yeah, in March, you kind of popped up in the feed, all about human-centered marketing. And literally, I was listening to it while preparing dinner, I think, in my kitchen here in Ireland. And I literally just was so excited that you were talking about all the things that I've been thinking about, and just I guess sort of reinforcing those thoughts that I've had. And yeah, it was wonderful. And I remember straight after dinner, I jumped in front of my computer and in the most I guess human-centered way sent you a SendSpark video, ironically, and it was just slightly overexcited. Just said thank you, this is great. I really want to kind of connect and all of that good stuff. And I think you kind of saw that later when we were arranging this, I think. And yeah, it was just the whole thing was great. You were on the podcast kind of talking about your new book, Human-Centered Marketing. How to connect with audience in the age of AI. And we'll dip into kind of quite a few parts of this in the call, but it was just it's just wonderful to kind of find somebody, I guess, talking about all this, Ashley. And since then I've been following other things you put out into the world, and obviously when I finally got the book, I was diving into that, which has been great. So yeah, I wanted to just I guess really kind of quick intro, if I could, from you, just about I guess who you are, what you do, and who you do it for, if that's okay, and maybe just a little intro, I guess, into human-centered marketing. Just tell us a little bit about the thought behind the book and kind of just a quick overview of the book, if you could.
Yeah, so I'm Ashley. I am a marketer, writer, and speaker by day, and a singer, actor, and fitness fiend by night. And I do, in true human-centered spirit, I do think that combining that professional and personal, that's a big deal for me. I truly believe we are always our full selves when we come to work. We just lean into different facets. And so I bring a lot of my, particularly from the musical theater side and kind of that singer actor side, I think there's a lot of really great parallels from a marketing perspective in terms of understanding the audience, adapting your language and your movements and all of those kinds of things into what the audience needs. So lots of synergy there. I currently work for Atlassian, so I'm in our demand gen and lifecycle marketing org, but I've held roles in product marketing and content marketing. So I consider myself to be a marketing generalist. I proudly claim that title. I know there's a lot of folks who think that's controversial, where they're like, "Oh, generalist isn't that bad," and I'm like, "I'm sorry, having more skills is not valuable." So yeah, I am more of a marketing generalist, but I've done the tour in specialist roles at Atlassian. So we're a collaboration software maker. So we make Jira, we make Confluence. Loom is actually one of our products. So on one hand, you can use your SendSpark videos. On the other hand, have you heard of Loom? May I introduce you to
It's
Loom?
so awkward when I realized that.
True marketer, right? Where it's like, "Wait, I thought we were here to talk about," like, "Oh, you want me to sell you something?" Which is funny because I actually say I never wanna sell anything to anyone. I wanna match problems with solutions, and so, obviously, I'm not coming on here you have not expressed pain or interest around a project management software, but you have expressed interest in creating, quick videos, to be able to make connections, and I'm like, "Ah, boom, it's perfect. There's reactions, and there's comments, and you can go back and forth, and it's got some really cool AI features," which also dovetails nicely with the discussion we'll have later about the pace of change and how AI is getting incorporated and where we lean in from a human perspective versus where we lean in from an AI perspective.
Fabulous. I really enjoyed the book, Ashley. Particularly actually, like it's kind of full of these like I guess real world examples that throughout everything you kind of say. It's just like, I mean, there must be many of them in there as I kind of flick through it, which just makes it so practical and brings the adds almost like story to each piece of information you give 'em, which I thought was fabulous. And yes, oh, Loom thing's good. I should also mention as well. I have three kids actually, and or my youngest, a 15-year-old girl, is massively into performing arts and theatre. All summer she's been doing two shows, and all day every day is in rehearsals. So I totally appreciate that. I guess theatre world and everything, all the skills that brings to someone, and the yeah, she's not lacking in confidence, shall we say, but certainly keep her grounded as well. But that's wonderful that I really love that you put those kind of personal side of your life out in your content as well as the commercial side, and that is one of the ways we kind of humanize what we're doing, isn't it? To dive into a little bit then, actually, the first thing I'd love to chat about is kind of a fairly fundamental thing for us, which is thought leadership, and particularly maybe from our point of view, thought leadership, kind of content creation and distribution about that. I'd love you just as an initial point in that, just tell me from your point of view, what do you see great thought, what does great thought leadership look like for you?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny, at like a super basic level, the question of what is thought leadership? What makes a thought leader, right? And it's like, it's literally in the phrase, have thoughts, be a leader. And I think people have a lot of pitfalls around that where they've got one or the other. I mean, in some cases they have neither and they're just out there puffing up their chest saying, I'm a thought leader. And I'm like, you have no followers, you don't say anything. Like what makes you think you're a thought leader, right? But ultimately, having something to say, having the depth of ideas around both the problem and the solution to be able to identify new problems, identify new solutions, and help the audience think and act in a new direction. And it's really shaping that conversation. It's driving the industry forward. That's the have thoughts piece. And then the be a leader piece, the kind of corollary to that is that you have to have followers. So you need to be sharing on social media, you need to be speaking on stages, you need to be writing, you need to be putting your ideas out into the world in a way that people can actually follow them and implement them. And so um, I allude to this a little bit in that answer with my four pillars of thought leadership. So the pillars are credibility, profile, being prolific, and then depth of ideas. That depth of ideas piece and the credibility pieces really make up the have thoughts piece, and then the prolific and the profile make up the be a leader piece. And you have to be strong in all four pillars. There's not one that's better than the other. I would say how you fall in each determines which type of B2B creator you are. So if you're very strong in all four pillars, then you are a thought leader. If you are lagging in, one or more pillars, you might be a subject matter expert, you might be an influencer, but to truly be a thought leader, you have to be strong across all four.
That brings me perfectly, I guess, to my kind of next question. Like quite often, the companies that we work with are kind of like growing relatively early, maybe, but growing sort of Series A, Series B companies. Um, there isn't always someone who is very well known already. They may not have built up a large following personally, um, but I guess so. So on in that situation, my question is how would those companies, I guess, go about best choosing or suggesting people within those sort of companies that should be, I guess, putting themselves out and their thoughts out there more, um, building up a kind of personal profile, but also just reinforcing, I guess, the problems that the company are trying to solve and just kind of attract, build that following probably as part of it as well. And is that more just subject matter experts and potentially, I mean, I don't think that's maybe as much influencers if they don't already have sort of the fame, as it were, or the audience. But are you really just kind of getting into finding subject matter experts that kind of are capable of presenting themselves and talking about things more? Is that the kind of answer in that level?
Per usual, I'm going to say it depends, right? It
Yes, no, it
depends on
is.
the
Yeah.
goals. It depends on the audience. It depends on those capabilities in house. So, to your point, so to give a little bit of an overview, subject matter experts tend to be very high on credibility because they've got a lot of experience. So, these are frequently your go to folks internally. They've got 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of experience. They're deep in the craft or the problem space. And so because of that, they're usually pretty solid on depth of ideas as well. They're so familiar with the problem space that they're actually pretty good at coming up with novel solutions for that problem. But they tend to be very weak on that profile and the prolific pillar. And one caveat with that prolific pillar is this is prolific externally. So I find being in the SaaS world, a lot of these types of folks sit in customer success. They might sit in solution engineering. And so they actually do create quite a lot of, presentations, articles, documentation. They might create a lot of videos, right? But it's all primarily focused on an internal audience or a specific subset of existing users. There is a lot of potential to turn that content into external assets to help them start to build up that profile, right? So, if they are interested in doing that and they are already skilled at creating that type of content, then it's just a matter of the company basically giving them the time and the halo effect of like, we're going to put you forward for media opportunities. We're going to put paid spend to promote your ideas, right? So that you become quote unquote the face of the company, the ideas, etc. Um, in that case, as they kind of start, because they tend to be still focused more on kind of company rate related solutions and existing solutions, they actually kind of the next thing they become would be what I call an internal influencer. And you mentioned Laura Erdem actually at the top of the call from Dream Data. She is a perfect example of somebody who is an internal influencer. So the Dream Data product, it's basically an attribution tool, and it helps you also do deep dives into deal cycles, understanding where in the journey, touch points, assets, et cetera, how deals progress. So for her as a sales leader, having that level of detail is like gold for her from a account management and a sales perspective. So she is the target audience. She's got super high credibility. She's got 15, 20 years of experience in sales. And then she is literally using the product to improve her sales, right? And so she's built this huge audience on LinkedIn. She's got almost 50,000 followers, and she is kind of one of the big faces of Dream Data. They actually put her on a billboard in Times Square a couple months ago, and they surprised her with it. They had done this kind of surprise. She and her team had partnered with the marketing team to do a surprise billboard for their CEO. And then a few months later, they took her out and she was on the billboard and they surprised her, right? So she's a perfect example of somebody that has high credibility and she has built that very strong profile. She's fairly prolific. She is primarily focused on LinkedIn and doing, videos. She does quite a lot of demo videos. They use Loom. Actually, sometimes I see it, I'm like, oh, there's Loom.
Of course they do.
So she uses Loom quite a bit, which is great. And from a depth of ideas perspective, she is, I rank her kind of in the like tactics, some strategies in there, but she would be the perfect representation of an internal influencer. Um, On the flip side, again, the one thing in terms of a thought leader is like really changing the conversation about attribution or sales tactics and those kinds of things. I would say that, she is not significantly changing that conversation. But again, there's a misconception that thought leadership is best. And the reality is, the type of creator that you need in the marketing mix is the one that serves the audience. And yes, there is a time when you do wanna be a thought leader, you do need to be putting that out on the market, you do need to be changing what the market is doing. So for example, the HubSpot fellows, Brian and Dharmesh, when they put out their book, Inbound Methodology, that like shifted the whole industry from a methodology standpoint. Obviously, that was very good for HubSpot to have that thought leadership. Now they've got the inbound conference that has grown beyond being a HubSpot user conference. That's an example of something that I would say is thought leadership and was useful beyond just saying, well, we think we should have a thought leader. It's like Laura is an excellent person for the Dream Data business. She drives a ton of impact for that business. She's well respected in the industry. She has smart ideas. They're very useful, but they are primarily in the existing space versus, again, Dharmesh and Brian, when they introduced the HubSpot methodology, that was a pretty seismic shift in the marketing industry and marketing methodology, right? So both can make a lot of money for the person and the company. Both are great for the people consuming it and for the audience, but they serve very different purposes. So if you're an early stage person, early stage company, or a smaller company, don't just assume that like, well, we're going to do thought leadership for a founder. Does your founder have thoughts? Do they have smart things to say? Are they willing and able to take the time to codify that information, put it out there in a way that others can consume it and learn for it, and consistently show up? Because if they're not the thought leader. If somebody else is doing all of the thinking and all of the ideation and all of the research and all of the engaging and all of the publishing, whoever that is, that's the thought leader, right? You can outsource you can outsource the content creation, but you cannot outsource the thinking, right? Too many people want a ghost thinker, not a ghost writer. And by definition, for it to be a ghost, there has to be somebody to ghost. So, yeah, it's I think there's definitely looking at the folks who are already creating, even if they don't have a big following. Companies can put money, and put their might behind them to say, this is the person that you should really be talking to.
I love all of that. Ashley, it's amazing because actually, even just this week, I was connecting with some folks on LinkedIn. Just happened to be working in one of my main clients, and it was an account executive. But we ended up in a chat, and talking about some content that we'd created for the company recently, and he was just really excited about encouraging, I guess, me to create more content for the company. He really saw the benefits of it from his point of view. Um, and like it was exactly that. It was like somebody in sales, I guess, who's just really, I guess, excited about the prospect and certainly really welcomed the content, and probably would be somebody who'd be great to kind of capture some content with and put, just to kind of facilitate them putting their message out into the world more. And he already had quite a good following on LinkedIn as well. But also, we do founders are quite often the folks that are put forward, especially when they are when they have time. Maybe I'm thinking of examples where founders are no longer also the CEO, for instance, and they've grown to a point where they're removed slightly from the day to day and just kind of have that time to be the thinkers, I guess, or to certainly devote the small amount of time required to, I guess, capture their thoughts, in a really good way, which is where I guess we come in. But also the support in the company to, I guess, yeah, hit them with questions, even just to draw out the thoughts, is sometimes a really great, a great help. That's all wonderful. I love that. Can you think of any, I guess those are all positive things. Are there, potential pitfalls, I guess? And you probably touched on some of them, but, thinking of where you've seen this go wrong, or the direction some folks go trying to create this sort of content. Yeah, I'd love you any thoughts on like how what bad, and I know in the book you kind of list what bad looks like as well. You list that first, which is really interesting. Yeah, just tell me a little bit about that, what you see and how what to avoid, I guess, in that sort of endeavor of putting out corporate thought leadership.
This dovetails, I think, with your work in the video space and also with the kind of crux of both of our missions around being human-centered in the age of AI. Um, if you outsource everything, at some point, the human has to show up. And if that happens and they are a completely different person, they have no idea, they can't articulate the ideas that have been shared on their behalf in other forums, scripted presentations or scripted videos or, written assets on LinkedIn or blog posts like, "Oh, we're just gonna slap a founder's name on it at the end, or we're gonna throw this exec's name on it at the end." If you have no idea what's in that, you're gonna look real dumb when you show up in person. And this is something that folks have said to me when they've met me in person. They're like, "Oh, you're the same person online and offline." And to me, I'm like, "Yes, that's I don't what were you expecting?" Right? But the perception that is someone ghostwriting or are you using AI, right? Like that is becoming more and more prevalent and people are questioning more and more, is this AI? Therefore, should I be skeptical of it? And so for those of us who have been creating for a long time and have shown up in person, where at least so far, it is not common to have a hologram show up on your behalf at these things, right? We literally shake hands, so you know I physically exist. We literally have a cup of coffee, so you know that I am actually human. I consume the coffee, right? Um, for those of us that came up in this old school world, I actually think we have an advantage because so many people have already had that experience offline with us that when they find us online, it matches. So that's the first pitfall is that if you're completely outsourcing everything, at some point when the human shows up, if they don't match, if they can't articulate, if they are clearly not fluent in the ideas, that's gonna be a problem, and that actually significantly damages the trust, the reputation, the rapport, etcetera, than just letting a slightly unpolished person speak or share, or reducing the frequency of publishing to accommodate true expertise and sharing. So that's the first piece. Um, Second pitfall on this, is basically like thinly veiled sales pitches. So people, again, I see this a lot, especially in earlier stage companies. The idea that just because it's a founder or an exec name on the byline, that automatically makes it thought leadership. And so they start to tell everyone, come, learn, be educated, see the next thing. And then it turns out it's just a pitch slap. And again, that significantly reduces the trust. And it's like, I don't want to engage with you because you're just going to sell me. We need to be explicit about what's happening, and it's counterintuitive, but if you give people the option not to buy when they are ready to buy, they're really freaking ready, and they will engage and engage and engage with you because you don't try to trick them into buying. You build that trust, you get them on board with your view of the problem space and the solution space. You do make them aware, yes, that you've got solutions, but you don't force them to go into this buying path when they're not ready. And so we actually break the trust when we keep insisting that something is thought leadership when in fact it is sales content. And so that's another kind of pitfall is this idea that like, oh, well, thought leadership is quality content. All of your content should be quality content, including your sales content. Like sales is not bad or icky. It gets icky when it feels like you're doing a bait and switch on people. If I tell you you're going to learn more and it turns out you're going to contact sales, that's not what we agreed to. That's not what I agreed to when I pushed the learn more button, right? So that I think is the other biggest pitfall is, basically misunderstanding what thought leadership is and billing it in a way that it basically breaks the trust with the audience because you're basically tricking them or trying to bait and switch them into a buy intent content or a buy intent action when they thought they were taking a trust intent or a learn intent action.
Amazing. Yeah, but like both of those things, we quite often when we first kind of engage with a new company and we're creating content, it's like our biggest job is to stop people talking about their own product, and just like defaulting into sales. It's all, it's a constant really in our world. And to the second point, like absolutely, I in a lot of the content we create and the way we go about things, even just it's it's so much, I guess, not away from that sort of like extreme outbound experience, almost of like straight into the sort of the sales pitch, I guess, and it's much more about a long term building of trust and demonstrating the solving of the problem, and just I guess that kind of longer term kind of 95% thing of being top of mind, and just being patient, I guess, and just yeah, being the obvious choice, I guess, when someone is in market, I love all of that, and I love that I guess approach to sales and starting the marketing leading up to that. And yeah, it was a great segue into the big subject of the day, actually, of AI. The very nature of what we do, I end up talking about this a lot. I'm always really worried about being like this extreme negative voice. I'm certainly not. I use AI every day in lots of really wonderful ways, I guess, in both in running my business and in the content creation for our clients. But you kind of you hinted at it with the potential holograms and whatnot. We're one step away from that, I guess, currently, in terms of AI avatars. And um, certainly you mentioned in the possibility of the real world not matching what's been put out into the world, and certainly that could be a ghostwriter creating text content. But in 2025 or mid 2025, that could be an AI avatar of somebody has been created, and somebody in marketing has created all this content based on the avatar of a founder. And that isn't a fiction anymore. I see that being done in lots of different ways. I see podcast episodes going out that are just completely AI avatars. I see certainly a lot of adverts, even in the B2B space. It's just AI avatars. And yeah, I just wanted to, obviously it's a fundamental kind of reason behind the book. It's how to connect with audience in the age of AI. So I'd love to just dive into that a little bit more, like that whole piece of, I guess, gaining and retaining trust in an age of AI. Um, as an initial kind of overview, just like tell me a little, dive into that a little bit in terms of the premise of the book, and just like what you see as the potential dangers there, like what to avoid, and how we stay, I guess, human centered in our marketing in that increasing proliferation of AI content and use in marketing.
Yeah, I think the thing that's so interesting about this is we have had the ability to manipulate perception and manipulate reality for years. And we have seen the backlash against that in other industries. So it's super interesting. If we think about Photoshop, for example, and the ability to manipulate photos, there's a whole rise right now. A lot of the fashion brands are starting to use AI, and they've been transparent about it, which I think is step one. Is you need to be transparent about saying when you're using AI, how you're using it, which models you used, how much of it was created by a human versus AI, etc. Um, but it's so interesting because everyone's basically using fashion to say, like, you can't even tell the difference, and, like, these are basically AI avatars. The models have come in and basically gotten mapped to train the images, I guess, image models, on themselves, and so the model actually exists, but now they're being scaled with AI tools, and everyone's like, "The fact that you can't tell means something," and I'm like, "I actually think it's less interesting because we've used Photoshop and airbrushing and, all of these tools for so long in the fashion world. It's not like any of those images have been real for years." So I actually think there is less of that. It's called the uncanny valley. And it's basically this concept. And it's true in AI, it's true in like robotics, it's true in a lot of different fields, but where basically something is off, but you don't quite know what it is, and it's just human enough that you're like, it actually makes you feel worse than knowing something's fake, right? Because it stresses you to try to figure out what's real and what's not. And humans don't like that. We like certainty. We like to see the patterns, and we like to be able to differentiate real from fake, danger from friend, etc. And so when something is in the uncanny valley, we don't know if it's real. We don't know if it's threatening. We know something is not right. And that triggers the like, something is not right. And I need to be on guard against whatever it is. Right. And the fact that I can't figure out exactly what's wrong is very distressing. So, funny enough, the fashion images don't actually trigger the uncanny valley anymore because we all know that, Photoshop and airbrushing and lighting and filtering and clipping the clothes and all of that kind of stuff has been happening for so long that it's like, whatever. I know this image isn't real. I don't know what they did to manipulate it. I don't care if it's AI or airbrushing or Photoshop or weird poses that you would never do to achieve a certain angle in the body, right? Like, but this is just not real, you know? So I actually think that from an image perspective and like a static image perspective, we're gonna see less backlash against that because it's so normalized. Um, I think that in writing, we're seeing a lot of backlash against that because of the lack of transparency. And so that's the thing that breaks trust is this and whether you have a human ghostwriter or an AI ghostwriter, insisting that you have produced something or done something that you have not in fact done, that's the moment where you break trust, regardless of whether it's a human doing it on your behalf or an AI doing it on your behalf. And I think that is going to continue to be more important with the rise of AI is being very transparent about how it's used, where it's used, when it's used, et cetera. So even for me internally, I've started putting we have Rovo, which is our AI product that basically is connected across all Atlassian products. And so anytime I use Rovo to do something, I put a note at the top of the page to say, I used Rovo for ideation, summarization, editing, whatever it is. Or Rovo generated this entire first draft based on these inputs. It hasn't had a human editor yet, or it still needs a human editor, right? And even though it's very common, it's totally accepted and expected that we use Rovo internally, I think it's important that we all get into the habit of declaring our AI use, right? And so that's something that I think will help build the trust. And I think that that will help keep kind of that human element. Even if something's 100% AI, just the fact that we know that immediately builds trust and makes us less skeptical of everything that we see when we can differentiate real from fake.
Amazing. Yes, I've noticed a few like particular, I guess, well known kind of content creators I guess in our space, even on their LinkedIn posts now, I put a little byline at the bottom saying like saying I didn't use this is my own words completely. I don't use AI. I've seen that being done, and like conversely, I see LinkedIn actually by default now pulls out kind of metadata from images and puts that little CR kind of mark on anything created in ChatGPT, and ironically anything created in Photoshop as well. I don't know if you've noticed this, and for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. And I love the example of the fashion world. Like to me, fashion imagery almost is like by default doesn't have trust now. I think people just expect that it has been kind of photoshopped or airbrushed to death. I say that as a photographer of 25 years. And absolutely, there's very little is completely raw. Like even any edit, any video that's created is edited. Like you're influencing it, you're changing the narrative to your requirements. But to me, I guess the extreme example that we always kind of, I guess, push against is the video AI avatars, you know, and like in where there is no transparency, and it's like this, I can just, you know, this will just save me loads of time. I'll just, you know, feed it a bit of video, and now my marketing department can create a year's worth of me, you know, like appearing, and I just, yeah, it's like the epitome of sort of lazy AI, I guess, you know, and I just, yeah, it's a slippery slope. I think that particular one, and the podcast really, and I love what you said about um, the unease. You know, I see people quite often now. A popular thing to say is, look, you know, these. I've cracked how to create great avatars. You know, maybe comments to get my particular prompts to be able to do this or something. Those sort of posts, but then, you know, half the replies are actually, you know, it's actually quite a bad example, or it's super creepy, or, you know, like all of these things, you know, and I totally feel that. I look at it, and I feel like I'm more sensitive to it because I'm creating video for a living and have done. But it's just, I do think they're creepy. I think they're soulless is how I describe it often. You know, and you mentioned even like the eyes. It's in photography we say the eyes are the window to the soul. You know, and I feel like it's just there's no soul there in these avatars. You know, and I think there'll always be a place for turning up completely as yourself, so that you are the real person that when people see you in person, you're the same, turn up as the same human, you know, and um, yeah, if that isn't the case, my company is, you know, is doomed, and we're all kind of doomed at that point as well, to be honest with you. So let's hope that
You know
doesn't be the
what's
case.
funny though? I've been thinking about this years ago. I wrote a blog post talking about the words homemade, handcrafted, like that genre of words. I mean, I wrote this probably 15 years ago at this point. And it's funny because homemade baked goods have this like kind of premium attachment to them, right? Handmade clothes or jewelry, right, is a handmade table has this. So it's I actually think we're going to see it go back the opposite way, where it's like, wow, human crafted, that's so interesting. You know, that's like a premium product because it's not cheap. It's not mass market. It's not fast fashion, right? And so it's so interesting. But then in on the flip side, if you see, you know, like a homemade box or something, then in some cases you're like, oh, that's kind of cheap. Like, why did you make this homemade thing? But a home cooked meal, homemade, you know, cakes, right? Like have this kind of luxury feel to them because a human put the time into it. Handmade cards, right? Like I remember again years ago shopping for my wedding invitations, and some of these invitations were like 10, 15, $20 per invitation. And I was like, what the I'm not paying that, right? And it's not that I don't respect the craftsmanship. I mean, seeing what these people are doing, it hand embossing or hand doing like the wax seal. Yeah, that takes a lot of time. Whether I'm willing to pay for that time is a separate issue, but I understand why it costs what it costs. And I do appreciate that this is a beautifully crafted invitation. That's just not where I wanted to spend my money. I actually spent more money on my photographer because I was like, that's the thing
Absolutely,
for me that's,
yeah,
you know,
money
I
well
care a lot
spent.
more about, right? Um, so I think we're gonna see kind of this renaissance of like human crafted as a luxury item because it does necessarily require more time than just generating 1,000 random AI images, compared to, in your case as the photographer, you know, going on site and adjusting your lenses and, you know, doing the manual editing that you can do.
I totally agree, and it's the value, I guess, is in the effort. It's the fact that somebody has spent time to capture the real thing, to put thought into it, certainly initially, but also just to capture it, and maybe then the human production after that as well. And also that, you know, speaking of the kind of the, I guess, the handmade or the homemade baking, you know, there's an imperfection to that as well, you know, which is really valued, I think, and the same totally applies to the content. I think, I think all the hesitations and the imperfections and the ticks and whatever that makes us who we are the things that people appreciate, and it's the signals that give the authenticity, should demonstrate the authenticity that builds the trust. It's just so important. And I guess, yeah, I'm hoping, I'm literally just hoping humanity, prevails, and those things are ultimately valued, and that as as the scale of AI content creation and our feeds are bound. I mean, I already see it, and I look for it very carefully, but I see it a lot in terms of the scale. But then, that when everything's like that, what's going to stand out is the people that have put in the effort to actually create the content, I think. Um, One last thought, I guess, on that, Ashley. I'm conscious that at the rate of change in that world, and not just about AI avatars, but all sorts of, I guess, just the rate of change of AI, really. I'm thinking even, the book, I first heard about the book, and when you were on Laura's podcast in March, that's what, like 4 or 5 months ago. I feel like the AI world has marched on quite significantly even since then, and bound to be since you like signed off the manuscript or whatever as well. What what are the things you see? And this could be anything. It could be, I don't know, AI SDRs. It could be um, the the agents, all of that stuff. Um, yeah, what are the very kind of latest things that you're like, oh, that's quite a big thing again, or potentially, in the same vein of a conversation is like maybe what the pitfalls of some of them are, or how you stay human centered, I guess, with those new tools and advancements kind of marching on as fast as they are.
It's kind of funny. The Google Perspectives tab, I mention that as kind of a trend, and how that tab, which they actually sunset fairly quickly after they launched it, but it was actually meant to bring in more of the human elements. And so instead of it just being brands, having blogs or something like that, it was, okay, Chris Nelson is the byline. Here's his LinkedIn, here's his YouTube, here's his podcast. See, Chris is credible to write this blog, not just human video. The company wrote this blog, right? Um, I think that a lot of the trends and principles discussed in the book are evergreen. A lot of people are like, "Oh, you wrote a book about AI." And I'm very like, "No, no, I very much did not write a book about AI." Because when, to your point, everything's changing, what are the things that actually stay the same? And for as much as we like to think that the humans, oh, we're constantly changing and on, right? There are some fundamental truths about humans that continue to remain the same. And the book touches on a lot of that. And so I actually think that there are some fundamental things in there. So, for example, I would say the latest with AI overviews, the amount of companies and marketers who are trying to rank in LLM recommendations and basically saying like, how do I rank in ChatGPT, right? There's a nod in the book to some of the fundamental SEO principles. And I actually talk about this from more of a first principles perspective around being keyword driven versus keyword informed versus keyword aligned. The reality is that most people miss, they think that old school SEO or traditional SEO was about the tools. And that is not the case. The tactics used in traditional SEO were meant to help the humans find the information that they needed. It was still about the humans. And humans process information in a very specific way in terms of hierarchy, in terms of how we skim, in terms of what we remember, all of those things. So, all of the SEO tactics of H1s and schema and metadata and information hierarchy and density and all of this, that is basically just translating what humans need to find and consume the right information in a way that the machines can surface it to them. It's the exact same set of core principles. I have a question, I want to find a credible answer to it, and I want to find that as quickly as possible. Yes, some people are using LLMs to do those searches, But this idea that you're suddenly going to do things to game the LLM system, the reality is most of them are actually looking at the same traditional markers of trust, authority, credibility, information density, helpfulness, all of those markers that worked in traditional SEO also work in the LLMs. And so it's funny because there's so many things that, yes, the tools change, but the first principles actually remain. And so I'm under no illusions that things have not changed. And I agree, things like the AI SDRs, the rise of agents, how much faster it is to be able to prototype things because you can set up agents to do those things for you. But at the end of the day, if you have no actual substantive content to put on this website that you magically were able to vibe code, that's great that you vibe coded something that doesn't say anything. Like, you still got to have something to put into it, right? And that's great that you can upload your video and now AI will generate a bunch of clips or can help you edit it. I've seen some really cool video editing tools where you can basically like choose like, sliders and stuff like that, like the stuff that would take you, a human editor, years ago for you to be able to do the kinds of fades and gradients and pans that AI can now do for you. But I still have to upload source material that's actually worth editing. It's not going to create that for me without something behind it. And so that's partly why I didn't go on a deep dive into specific tools or models in the book, because that's going to continue to change. But the foundational principle of building trust, having something worth saying, staying on top of the trends, iterating, um, being truthful with your audience, authenticity, empathy, all of that, um, that all stays the same. So it's an interesting balance, right? Because having this conversation, they're like, "How did you feel about writing an AI book and publishing it?" And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I wrote a human book."
Yes. 100% a human-centered book. And you've seen my notes. Actually, I have the words, the book is very evergreen, but in front of me, I totally agree with that. And it's a wonderful book about those kind of core fundamentals that I feel like, in 2025, I feel a lot of people have kind of been distanced from through, diving deep into, surrounded by tools and data and whatnot. And it's a wonderful kind of revisiting of the fundamentals that will hopefully carry us through this AI age, I guess. I know, yeah, 100%. That's how I feel every day I wake up, actually. I say it's been wonderful. I really appreciate your time. What's the best way, I guess, for people to find out more about what you do and kind of keep up to date with the thoughts? And what's the best way for people to get their hands on the book?
So I always tell people follow me on LinkedIn, connect on LinkedIn. That's where I spend a fair portion of my time and share a lot of the same ideas and observations that are in the book. You can buy the book directly from Amazon or Barnes and Noble. It's with all the booksellers. You can also buy it from Kogan Page, the publisher, with the discount code. I think it's Kogan Page 25 in all caps if you want to get a discount. So yeah, lots of options to find human-centered marketing.
Amazing. I'll include links to all of that in the show notes as well to make that really easy for people to find. Again, thank you so much for your time. Actually, it's great to, after all our communication, to have a really good chat about all the things that are, I feel, important to both of us. But it was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.